So VRLAMXXAB8 and D, Vrlamksabond, come out of a very recent experience that I went through on January 10, 2020. It does seem somehow super surreal, but for me it's a bit surprising, but it makes a lot of sense because it kind of, in a very eruptive way, shows the relationship between the security state and the banking system, and who are the guardians of capitalism within global capitalism, and specifically what's happening now in Beirut, where I'm from. So on the 10th of Jan, I was held captive and detained by my bank for simply just going there to take my money, which they have confiscated as everyone else in the population, mostly like what they call small account holders, since 3 months, since October 2019. And I simply voiced out that the banking system is in a way very much entrenched with the logic of crisis, and they are to be held responsible for the crisis we're at. So I ended up being held captive in the 2 meter by 2 meter office. I was first accommodated in, and I then was detained, and as a result I filed 2 lawsuits against the bank, and they're now threatening me with different kind of fabrications that they try to use to silence people, like disciplinary measures and things like that.
So the lawsuit is still going on?
Yeah, and lawsuits like this in Lebanon would take at least 2 years. So it's a very long story. Maybe this is the first part of a series of installations that looks at the banking system as part and parcel of the carceral continuum. So the relationship between banks, the idea of the treasury box, and the prisons also, and the politics and dynamics of confiscation. For instance, if we look at the debt economy, what debt does to us is that it kind of confiscates our future. So it forces you into certain decisions. So what happened to me at the end, being really confined in an office in the bank, does very, maybe symbolically even communicate dynamics that are very common to global capitalism, like the economic system I was born into. So the October Revolution in Lebanon started as a response to the last 30 years of rule, where you basically had warlords, war militias, founders of war militias becoming politicians, So the militia was turned into political parties. In Lebanon, you have a very multi-partisan system, but it's based on sectarian politics. So the revolution is very much anti-sectarian. It demands that we enter a new political phase where all of the party-based politicians are in a way resigned, And what's been happening in the revolution is really amazing, because basically it took 30 years for people to, in a way, celebrate and confront the end of the war. So it's really wanting to enter into a new mode of being together. And if we actually look at how the last 30 years governance has been, in a way, practiced in Lebanon, we actually see that the state is a bank. So basically it works on, getting funding for infrastructure that are not properly working or dysfunctional, and most of the infrastructure is also already privatized, and we kind of are always living in a post-war paradigm where there's still no 24/7 electricity, but as long as there's no electricity all the time, this is a good source to get funding for electricity. So the electricity problem never gets fixed, though technically it's something that can be fixed. So anyway, it's also with the beginning of the reconstruction of Beirut, there was a lot of debt. Debt economy, ruling us, confiscating our future. So the state is a bank.
Yeah.
So when the revolution started, in the first, there was a series of 11 consecutive days of public strikes. You go down your house, you block the road in front of your house. And we met a lot of people, we met each other, like people who would then organize together through just proximity, because it turned out we were blocking the same road, which is next to us, or, and so it's like very also like the revolution, as all revolutions, but and like in a very also moving way, is like very much based on work on the ground, So it's kind of very contrary to this like promising politics, like protracted also promises of politicians. So very clearly it's against the oligarchy. And we know like the banking system, who it protects and is already the one that we have today in capitalism is like oligarchical. Personally, I don't think that we should abolish banks. We should establish new banks. So if we come to also think of it like an alternative economies, for instance, the absolute cooperative is a bank, However, it's a bank where the economic relations and the dynamics of what's actually happening in the economy is not a secret. The banking system is very much about banking secrecy. So because I was threatened with physical violence, I was also beaten up by one guard, and I was deprived of my privacy. They tried to take my phone. So in a way, like the bank has violated me in many ways, and I haven't done anything. So what they found that they kind of can accuse me of, though actually they cannot, it's not even legally viable, is that they accuse me of breaching banking secrecy, because I took a photo. I took one photo all throughout, and it was a photo of 4 employees swarming on their phones and reading like published text I had online and reading my statuses on Facebook. So they were breaching my privacy and they were reading them out loud, and they have breached their banking secrecy. The thing is that over like 35% of shares in banks are owned by politicians. This bank in specific is owned by a former Minister of Finance, who was also like a former president of the ICC, the International Chamber of Commerce, and who's also like known, who's a very well-known, notorious neoliberal force within the region. And also, the thing is, I have the bank account. This bank account was opened by dint of a previous post I had as a technologist at a human rights organization that fights for the release of political prisoners. And they've been, like, whenever I went in the first 3 months, they would tell me, we're gonna forcefully close down your account and all of the accounts of the Amnesty International employees because you think you work on politics while you don't know what are your rights and responsibilities. You wanna take in US dollars, take in Lebanese lira. They basically, it kind of, like there are all of these patterns happening, but it's like this kind of also very personalized attack that's happening, a very big abuse of power. So, so for me, it's a very visible, contested arena, like political arena. Just going to the bank became something else. Like, for instance, there were several actions that's still happening where banks would not give people their salaries, people would go in groups, Also, there are some things that I try to do as a follow-up to my case where things that often you would do alone in the bank all of a sudden it becomes like a collective concern, and that's amazing. And I think this is something that we should really keep, because the economy is a collective thing, and we make it together. And while things have been getting harder because of how deep the economic crisis is, I don't really think that there's a lot to think about of what is crisis, what is the economic crisis. For instance, one of the questions I ask in this piece is, what if the real economic crisis is that while Lebanon, most of the land in Lebanon is agricultural, very little is planted. Isn't this the actual economic crisis? Isn't the economic crisis that like people feel like they cannot, there's a brain drain, There's a brain drain all over the country. Also, many people feel in a way kind of censored or silenced or excluded from the artistic scene, so people have to resort to not what they actually want to do or where they see where they want their collective work to be put forward. This is an economic crisis. It's not about the devaluing of the Lebanese currency. So for instance, on the ground, there's this 12 by 7 meter floor print in the space. And one of the places we have written, I wrote, devalue all currencies. So all currencies, I think, need to be devalued rather than thinking of wanting to, for instance, just make all the banking system electronic. We need an anti-currency, we don't need a new currency. And from another part of the print, we have decipher proprietary systems, because I'm looking also at the failed cryptography of both the economy and the state. So the whole composition is made up of, it's 5 channels, so made up of 5 speakers, 4 in quadraphonic, and then we have a 5th speaker, which is more, in a way, kind of penetrating into the circle and the square that we have with the quadraphonic system. So the speakers are there's a 4 meter distance, so there's this 4 meter virtual square and circle. But actually the room I was held in was 2 meter by 2 meter from what I remember, what I can tell myself. So it's not about reconstructing at all, the space, or on the contrary, it's more of about re-putting together certain relations that I can learn from what I've experienced also. So the whole composition is 32 minutes long, and it's all 200 BPM. Okay. So it's very fast. And I feel also, I just realized yesterday that, this work would usually take 6 months for me, to do. I finished it in 5 weeks. But for me, it was really interesting that the work that I'm doing that's very much around the roots of capitalism was supposed to take 6 months, but was finished in 5 weeks, It kind of also communicates, the dynamics. Basically in Arabic, the word for capitalism is رأس مالية, رأس المال, and capital is رأس المال, and it literally means the head of money. But also, mal in Arabic, if we say, for instance, mal as a verb, it means to tilt, to sway, to go in one direction. So there's always, this oscillation. But also, if I say, for instance, malaki, it would mean your money. But then if I ask it as a question, it's what's wrong with you? What's up with you? But if we kind of dissect its morphology, it's ma means what? Laki is for you, so money is what is for you. But the thing is, and which I try to touch upon in the composition and in the text that I also wrote on the subject, that money is not ours, it belongs to the system of valuation. So we see also different sorts of lights. There are basically 4 kinds of lights that I'm using in the installation. From the very floor to the recesses under the floor to the to also the place where the floor is, where the ceiling and the walls meet. So at the same time, in a way, the space looks like a the whole of or the treasure box, or the treasury space of a bank, but at the same time it looks like an intergalactic prison. It looks like an unfinished game with some labyrinthine elements, and it also looks like a dance floor. So Ra's al-Mal, as we said, is the head of money, and in English also capitalism comes from kaput, which means head. But if we switch one letter from the hamza to the qaf, Ra's al-Mal is the dance of money. So in a way, this system which is always in fluctuation and which claims to be stable, but it destabilizes everything, the environment, also it destabilizes our social and collective relations.